Sergeant Daniel Thompson adjusted the collar of his dress uniform for what felt like the 100th time. The soft hum of conversations and the clinking of champagne glasses filled the grand hall. But he felt out of place among the polished shoes, glittering gowns, and perfectly tailored suits. A decorated war veteran, Daniel had spent most of his adult life in the dust and chaos of faraway battlefields. The invitation to this event had been as unexpected as it was surreal. "Tonight, you're not just representing the army," his commanding officer had said earlier. "You're representing every soldier who has served. Make us proud." The music swelled, and Daniel stood at attention. The weight of a dozen medals pinned to his chest, he scanned the room, noting the gleaming chandeliers, the golden trim of the walls, and the faces of political elites he recognized from news broadcasts. His thoughts wandered to his last deployment. Heat waves shimmering off sand dunes, the distant echo of mortar fire. This world of silk and crystal seemed like another planet. A hush fell over the crowd as the music shifted to a slower, more intimate melody. The event's host appeared on stage, thanking everyone for their service, their contributions, their sacrifices. Daniel caught snippets of the speech, but his mind was elsewhere. His fingers twitching with muscle memory, searching for the grip of his rifle. It wasn't nerves, it was instinct. Then it happened. "Sergeant Daniel Thompson," the voice boomed over the speakers. "Would you join us on the dance floor?" Quote, the spotlight found him, and the room erupted in polite applause. He froze, his training screaming at him to react, to move, to act. But this was no battlefield. A woman approached him, her smile as poised as her steps. She extended her hand, her eyes locking with his, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them. He hesitated, his palms sweating. She whispered something he couldn't hear over the pounding of his heart. Then, almost as if by autopilot, he took her hand. The dance floor felt impossibly large as they moved to the center. The music resumed, and Daniel did his best to follow her lead. She moved gracefully, effortlessly, her gaze steady and kind. Daniel, in contrast, felt like a marionette with tangled strings. As they danced, the room seemed to blur, the faces and lights fading into the periphery. Daniel felt a strange warmth spreading through him, a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. For the first time since returning home, the weight of his experiences began to lift. His partner spoke softly, her words meant for him alone. "You carry so much," she said, "but you're more than the battles you've fought." Daniel opened his mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he nodded, feeling a lump rise in his throat. The melody slowed, the final notes stretching into silence. Applause erupted once more, but Daniel hardly noticed. The woman gave him a gentle smile, squeezed his hand, and then turned to leave the dance floor. "Wait," he called out, his voice cracking. "Who are you?" Quote. She turned back, her expression unreadable. "Just someone who wanted to remind you that even soldiers deserve a moment of peace." And then she was gone, disappearing into the crowd. Daniel searched for her, weaving through the throng of people, but it was as if she had never been there. The rest of the night passed in a haze. He smiled politely, shook hands, and accepted compliments, but his mind was elsewhere. It wasn't until later, when he returned to his modest apartment and set his medals on the nightstand, that he noticed something odd. His reflection in the mirror seemed different. The lines on his face were softer. The haunted look in his eyes diminished. On his chest, where her hand had rested during the dance, he felt an inexplicable warmth. as though she had left a piece of herself behind. Over the following weeks, Daniel's life began to change. The nightmares that had plagued him for years became less frequent. The crippling anxiety that had once made crowds unbearable seemed to fade. He found himself smiling more, connecting with old friends, and even volunteering at a local veterans center. But the questions lingered. Who was she? How had she known exactly what to say? And why had she chosen him? One evening, driven by curiosity and a strange sense of duty, Daniel returned to the grand hall where the event had taken place. The building was deserted, its once vibrant walls now draped in shadows. As he wandered the empty space, his footsteps echoing against the marble floors, he noticed something he hadn't seen that night. A portrait hanging near the entrance. The painting depicted a woman in a flowing gown, her hand extended in a graceful gesture. Her eyes seemed to follow him, her expression serene yet knowing. Beneath the portrait was a plaque that read, "Dedicated to all who serve and sacrifice. May you find the peace you seek." Daniel felt his breath catch. It was her, the woman who had danced with him. But the date on the plaque stopped him cold. The dedication had been made decades ago, long before he had been born. As he stared at the portrait, a chill ran down his spine. The faint strains of a waltz seemed to fill the air, though the hall was silent. And for the briefest moment, he felt her presence again. A comforting warmth, a reminder that he was not alone. From that night on, Daniel carried the memory of the dance with him, a talisman against the darkness. He never spoke of it to anyone, knowing they wouldn't understand. But deep down, he believed he had been given a gift. Not just a moment of peace, but a reminder that even in the harshest of realities, there was still room for grace, for kindness, for hope. And in his quiet moments, when the world seemed too heavy to bear, he would close his eyes and remember the music, the warmth of her hand, and the words that had changed his life forever.